I look for it every week like I do Monday Morning Quarterback. Absolutely love it.
Well, when I worked at SI.com, I told, because basically the fantasy department before me was pretty non-existent, and it's no fault of anybody. They just were a little late on getting on the trend. And I told them I'd like to create something like MMQB. And they said, well, good luck with that. And it turned out that it worked out pretty well, and so it carried over to National Football Post as well. But I appreciate the comment.
Oh, man, just great. Jay, let's start with the first question. I mean, we're into it already. Injuries galore. Everybody sitting at this table is desperate, trying to figure out players to save our you-know-whats this week. Give us a couple players that might still be on our waiver wire that we could pick up last minute that might be able to save our weeks.
Well, let's take it from a 12-team perspective. He was there before the week. C.J. Spiller was probably available to everyone, outside of someone who lives in Buffalo, both prior to Wednesday. He, with Fred Jackson out for the season, C.J. should get the majority of touches, which necessarily doesn't mean carries. I don't think anyone could possibly touch Jackson in terms of repetition like carries. But I could see maybe 5 or 6 dump passes coming to Spiller. If you're in a PPR league, Spiller probably has more value than regular league.
Yeah, and he catches the ball well too. I mean, they for a while when Fred Jackson was out there, they were lining Spiller up as a wideout.
He will be great someday. I have no doubt. He is too athletic. He's too bright, and frankly, Buffalo needs him for him to just be an average player for the next 3 to 4 years. I fully anticipate a breakout coming next year.
Hey, Jay, I'm over here reading. Mark turned me on to you, and I was reading. I was reading your revelations kind of during our breaks. I'm reading right now your Run to Daylight, and you talk about of all the NFL teams that currently have a losing record, the Seahawks at 4-6 have the best chance of running the table, and then you go on to say how this ties into fantasy because you may want to get Marshawn Lynch, possibly Sidney Rice, and maybe even Tavares Jackson from here on out in fantasy. What have you seen from these guys that make you think that they'd be all right to get in our fantasy lineups?
Well, obviously, Lynch has been like a top 12 back all season, especially the last 6 weeks, so he's obviously owned. But when I say that, I mean it's going on the assumption that your trade deadline is still not passed. For a lot of people, the deadline passed either Wednesday or Friday, so you're pretty much, outside of waivers, you're pretty much stuck with the team that you have.
Right.
Fingers crossed for a championship, all that stuff. But if you can certainly get Sidney, who's been struggling. But Sidney, to me, and I don't know if I wrote this the other day or the week before, but he is the king of drawing interference penalties in the end zone, which means absolutely squat in fantasy, and Marshawn Lynch gets the 1-yard touchdown. Sidney is a great red zone target, but he draws interference penalties, which is great for the real world, but not necessarily good for fantasy. But it does translate to good news for the next 6 weeks. They have 4 of their final 6 games at home. They have 3 straight with Washington, Philly on Thursday, and then St. Louis on a Monday night, which I believe is December 11th, something like that. St. Louis, by that point, will be playing out the string. Seattle, if they should stay hot, just like I think they will be, will continue to do. You're looking at a 35-point explosion in Week 14, and that's pretty much the first week of the fantasy playoffs.
Yeah.
So you could ride Seattle guys. Jackson can theoretically give you something like 250 yards and maybe 3 touchdowns in that week against the Rams. He's a sneaky good start for the playoffs, just like Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton has Arizona and St. Louis in weeks 15 and 16. You could potentially ride him to a championship.
Very interesting, because you're not always counting on those Seahawks to pull out some fantasy football points for you.
Well, that's where it comes. I hate to be a Debbie Downer here, but I always point to Tom Brady's magical season of 2007 in Week 15, which is typically the semifinals. He was at the Jets, or maybe he was home at the Jets. I can't remember which one it was, but it was really cold, rain, wind, really blustery conditions. He threw for 140 yards and 0 touchdowns. So everybody who rode him single-handedly to the playoffs got their butts kicked because they you're never going to bench Tom Brady. But the stars of the guys who win you a championship are completely different from the guys who carry you to the playoffs.
Right.
And people need to remember that.
All right, I got a roster question for you.
Sure.
Plaxico, Jerome Simpson, or Antonio Brown?
2 of the 3.
Yeah, I need two of those 3.
Oh, 2 of 3. I would definitely go Simpson and Brown. As much as I love Plax, he's a fellow MSU alum. I make this joke every time, but it's not really a joke. He's good for 4 catches and 38 yards every game. And of those 4 catches, you have to hope and pray that one of them results in a touchdown. Whereas Brown and Simpson, I'm a targets guy. I can't plan for touchdowns every week with receivers, but I can certainly guarantee you what's going to happen in terms of targets based on their track record in the last 5-7 weeks or something like that. Brown is probably top 15 in targets, and Jerome Simpson, even with Green out there, I sincerely doubt that Green is 100% A.J. Green. So Simpson had 8 catches, 152 yards last week. Don't expect that kind of contribution, but he's also the type of guy that can get you 5 catches for 120 yards. He has game-breaking ability, and I'm sorry, at this age, I just wouldn't go with Flex.
Well, and you know what? In most leagues, Simpson's still available, and I think part of it is because of his arrest, though. Yeah. And I think people thought he was going to jail.
Yeah, but that was like 8 weeks ago.
He probably should have done.
What have you done for me, society? I have more appreciation for Simpson as an 152 guy than him having a bunch of friends at his house that like pot. So it's one of those things.